Thank you, Ryan Walters, Secretary of Education for the state of Oklahoma, for joining me today on the Thousand Stories podcast, where we aim to break the public narrative that everything is broken with stories of real good, of visionary leaders and collaborative partnerships and relationships really intending to serve the community in different ways. I believe there are 1,000 incredible stories for every bad story that you hear online or on the news. And so it's incumbent upon us to tell those stories. And I believe that you are going to be able to share some of those stories with us today. So thanks for joining us. The thing that caught so you and I have known one another now for a little bit of time, and I had thought about asking you to join this podcast because you've really got some incredible things going on. But the thing that really caught my eye and made me send you that text message was a press conference that I saw you holding with some other state dignitaries. The governor, of course, was there as well. And what was really impactful for me is that sitting in front of you were dozens of kids on the ground. And, I think you were in the Blue Room in the Capitol, and dignitaries all around, Pro Tem Treat and, Superintendent Hoffmeister and, like all of the really incredible leaders in our state. But there were dozens of kids sitting on the ground. And in parts of that press conference, those kids were a little bored, like this is the all of the big wigs. Oh, yeah. But there was a part of the press conference where you stopped everything and you said, I'm a teacher. I just want to talk to the kids for a minute. And the message you shared, I'll post it online, but the message you shared was really one about the community coming together and believing in them. And it was really, it may not have been emotional for you. You're in those situations regularly. But for me, I was caught up in that moment. And so it made me say, yeah, I've got to see if he'll join me. And so I'm thankful for you doing that. What it did for me also was really illustrate the opportunities that leaders in these large organizations have to continue to stay regularly connected with the people that they're trying to serve. The need is to build a feedback loop, of course, but also even a deeper relationship with the communities that you're trying to serve, the actual people. And I think that's there are a lot of places where organizations fail in that respect. So I wanted to just say thank you for that moment. I won't forget it, and thank you for joining. But also, if you would, maybe use that as an opportunity to give us some of your background and tell us what connects you to education.
Well, absolutely. Now, first of all, Secretary Brown, thanks for having me on the show. I've been a big fan. I've been watching other podcasts, and I love the concept of, again, so many times we focus on, so much of the negative that goes on, and obviously that's understandable to a degree. But when I travel the state, when I get to work with the government employees, when I'm out and about, I see great things going on, especially in the education realm. I get to meet these fantastic teachers. I get to interact with parents all the time. They're telling me about what their kids are working on, what's going on in their school, the things they're excited about. And so I think it's really important to share those stories. So I am super excited today to be here and to get to talk with you about that. And again, I'm just a huge fan of the work that's going on at DHS and all that you all are doing with our communities and for the state as a whole. There's just been so many great stories, so exciting the work you're doing. So I am just so thrilled to be here.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Well, absolutely. And I think I appreciate you starting that way too. For me, there was this moment where you had all these leaders from around the state that were there, and it was a press conference that we were holding because there was a litany of education bills that passed this year that really dealt with kids from really all backgrounds. Some dealt with rural public schools, more urban, suburban public schools. There was some charter school legislation. There was some dealing with private schools as well. And so we got students from around the state there and had all these, influential leaders from the Capitol there, and we were talking about what all had happened. And to me, it's always important to connect that back to the people that you're trying to make a difference for. And so many times I feel like, and again, all those folks that were standing up at the front of the room, that's why they were doing it. I mean, I know Pro Tem Treat, and I know where his heart is. I know the governor, I know where his heart is. And those are those conversations is how do we help this kid? What difference, if we do this, how would it help there? And so I wanted to bring that back to this is why we're here. This is why the community's here. It's why you have these nonprofit leaders here, business leaders here around the room. Is for you, for all you students. It's why your principal is here. It's why it's what brings us together in a like-minded cause. And I think it's really important that, to your point, just a little bit about my background. So I've been a public school teacher. I've done 10 years in the classroom. I did 8 years full-time where I was a history teacher at McAllister High School. That was what I wanted to do. I knew it from I was 13. I had about 4 amazing teachers in a row, and I just came home and told my grandpa, I'm going to be a teacher. Like I'm dead set. No, that's what I want to do, just because of the difference they made in my life. And so my background being in the classroom, working directly with students, working with teachers to help students, and then getting to know parents and really trying to engage them and what the work we were doing. When the governor asked me to step into this role, it was important to me to keep that connection. So I've continued teaching in a classroom part-time to kind of continue building those relationships with students and really having that in the classroom experience. And it really helps keep me very grounded to the issues our teachers face. And again, I think teaching well is incredibly difficult. When you talk about a classroom of 30 students that have varied backgrounds, that have different learning capabilities, have different talents, have different barriers, and moving them all to a high expectation, to an academic achievement level, and encouraging all of them, that's an incredibly difficult job to do. I think it's important in whatever decisions we make from a statewide level, we take into account the complexity of the job and the complexity of learning. And so, for me, it's always been an approach that, again, I talk to teachers every day, talk to parents every day, trying to have that real connection down with the folks that are working with our young people and making sure that everything we're doing is empowering them to be successful. So sorry, that was kind of a long response there.
No, it was great.
But that's the way that I, kind of view the work being done.
So you currently teach AP U.S. History, is that correct?
Yes, sir. So
Great.
I've been teaching AP U.S. History in 2 schools, one in Oklahoma City, Millwood, and then one in McAllister. And a lot of it's virtual.
Yeah, sure.
And then some of it, again, I got to go to Millwood a lot in person. McAllister was, I'd show up, about every other week in person, but it was mainly a virtual setting. But again, getting to work with those students was, I've had some great students that I've got to still be able to interact with and teach and work with over the last couple of years, even being up here.
So the reason I wanted to clarify that is because I really believe you in that setting, you have an incredible insight, and you referred to it right there, insight into the barriers that exist that prevent our kids from being successful in the education world. I also believe, so I do personally believe that there are poor outcomes across our state in lots of systems. And it all ties back to the interconnectedness of systems. So, for example, poor outcomes in education, poor outcomes in health, poor outcomes in the correction system. We can point to lots of spaces in which we are bottom 10 in numbers. Now, our goal, of course, and we're on the charge to become top 10, I believe that part of the reason we have these poor outcomes is because these systems are connected and they haven't worked well with one another. I will, in our system, the human services system, definitely raise my hand as a part of that. Our system needs to be better at connecting because kids many times aren't showing up to school in a position to be to where we can expect them to learn and to be successful. They're hungry. They may be homeless, couch surfing. They, and if they've got a parent who's been incarcerated because of the disconnection of the correctional system, I think there are connected systems that could work together. You and I are working closely together in some spaces, as are so many others today in state government. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the barriers that you see for the kids that you engage with?
Absolutely. And I appreciate those comments because I agree. We really have to take a holistic look when we talk about a child and we talk about academic successes. We want to take that holistic look of what is the child dealing with, what are ways for us to improve. And to your point, you're saying taking an internal look at the work being done at DHS. And I think when the goal is making things better for a child and empowering a child, we all have to take a look at our practices. We all have to try to do better. And I don't mean that to sound overly critical. I just mean that to say, when you're entrusting me with a child, and when the state of Oklahoma, we've got 700,000 students, over 700,000 students in our schools, we always have to be looking at how we can improve for each individual student. And so we just always have to have that type of attitude. And so, when we look at it, what are ways that we can further empower our teachers, empower our school leaders? What's ways we can develop best practices across the state? So I agree that we have to take that type of approach. And to your point, we've got to work together. There has to be a unified, and if we can agree on that our goal is to empower our young people to be successful, hey, we can all agree on that. Now that doesn't mean we don't have differences of opinion, right? But we can all agree on that front. That gets us all in the room. That gets us all talking. And when there's not a concern about who gets credit, and when there's not a concern about, it was their idea, or I have traditionally been opposed to that. If we just say we're gonna have an open dialogue, we're going to take the approach of what's best for kids. Let's leave kind of all of that at the door, and let's just talk and let's have these conversations. And I know that you and I have been a part of this with the broader cabinet and government officials, where we've been working on a workforce initiative where we've all come together, higher ed, career tech, workforce, DHS, all get in the same room and just really start talking through, look, what are services being offered? Who's falling between the gaps? What's the strategic vision moving forward? What do we do to just put, and you and I, we loved it. I don't know who shares this quote more, me or you, but we've both fallen in love with it. Secretary Robinson on the cabinet, General Robinson, uses this phrase that workforce starts when you ask a child what he wants to do, what he wants to be when he grows up. Mm-hmm. And it's such a great connection all the way down to those early grade levels. And instead of workforce always being, and again, the training programs are incredibly important. So I'm not trying to make light of that. But you see the connectivity there, that honestly, if you get that third grader excited about being a firefighter, that third grader might go on and be a firefighter.
Well, you're the perfect example. You had 4 great teachers in a row, and that's how you were sort of nurtured into this education space, intentionally or unintentionally. Yep. That's how it worked. You didn't leave school and then say, oh, I'm going to be a teacher. You started when you were young, and that's how we've got to engage with our kids.
That's exactly right. I mean, again, it breaks my heart when I've had some students tell me, well, my mom or dad's a teacher, and they told me I really shouldn't get into teaching. I think it's an amazing job. Mm-hmm. I think it is the most rewarding thing that you can do. Again, I mean, these are my biases as a teacher, but I'm just going to say there's nothing like having young people in your room. They're so hopeful. They're optimistic. If shown the pathways to success, and so many of our young people don't see the pathway to success. They've got a background of poverty or of the different barriers that to them, college or a great career is as far as the moon. And so showing them, no. Actually, you're unique. You're special. Here's your skill set. Here's things you need to get better at. I'm going to hold you to these high expectations because you can do it. And that over time, again, the teachers that did that to me just got me on fire about the profession. And so anyway, that's something, that's a perspective that I bring is just as a teacher thinking it's, again, I'm pretty unapologetic that I think it's the best profession. But when you look at the workforce initiative, again, that's been a quote that we've really used to bring everyone together and just talk about we're all in this together. We all have the same goal. So let's really take a look at our practices and let's see what we can do. And again, I love the attitude that the team has brought to the table. And, as a teacher, sometimes you run into I taught high school, and it's easy sometimes to say, okay, well, our students here, in 9th or 10th grade aren't learning as well as they could. Well, why didn't the junior high teacher, they came in behind, so it's the junior high teacher's fault. Then you go to the junior high teachers, and they might say, well, I mean, the students are behind because of the elementary school. What I've seen, again, luckily the teachers I've worked with, they don't take that approach. We always had great vertical alignment where we were all meeting together going, okay, we're seeing problem A, the student isn't understanding, this type of geography concept. What can we do to embed that earlier? What can we do to maybe even benchmark that earlier and really see where students are struggling? And again, that type of approach is always, I think, going to be really, really beneficial and is really going to be the only way to take all these different groups, all the different human capital involved, all the different systems involved in getting them to work in commonality.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% that collaboration is critical. And whether it's in a workforce setting or an education setting, we all have to walk into these spaces with a level of humility because none of our systems are working as perfectly. We have not achieved perfection in any space. And it doesn't mean we have failed. It just means we have great opportunity. And so when you talk about the vertical alignment of teachers from elementary school all the way to middle to high school, there also has to be an alignment, I guess you might call it a horizontal alignment with the other systems because you can't expect that child to grasp that the geography issue that you just brought up if they can't focus because they're hungry. So that means our system has to step in and be supportive of that child at the same time. And so the complexities there are deep, but it will never be solved without proper collaboration between organizations.
Oh, I mean, that's exactly right. And when you look at a student, that might not be being fed, or you look at a student that has some health ailment, that you talk about adding that on. And, that's the thing that, has always really, I've got several of those stories of students I taught that just breaks your heart when you hear what's happening at home, when you hear about the way that they're coming in the morning, and what can we do to utilize all services to ensure that student, again, I talk a lot about academic, being the Secretary of Education and being that's, but an all of the above approach. I mean, again, a child isn't just a test score. A child is a lot of other things. And again, that's what trying to talk to students and trying to build that in students, that's one of the things we always try to talk about is encouraging them and empowering them. And it might be, again, I tell them, hey, look, this test is important. This test isn't everything. Okay. Hey, I don't even remember what I made on some of those tests, right? It's not like it's going to, but, there's importance to it, right? College acceptance, scholarships. I'm not saying it's not important, but you're more than a test score, right? There's your mental health. We need to talk about that. You okay? What's going on at home? Hey, how can I help you? I noticed, and again, when you talk about all of those factors adding up, you can see why oftentimes you have students that are in poverty, that do have these health ailments, that tend not to do as well in school. Sure. And you just look at that from a frustration of us as adults. It's frustrating enough living in those conditions, but especially if you're a young person, it's just an incredible barrier for our young people to overcome.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about horizontal alignment. I just made that term up. I don't know if that's real or not, but for the purpose of this conversation, horizontal alignment means connecting different systems for the purpose of serving. You and I have begun to learn about a model called the community schools model. And I wasn't intending to talk about this, but obviously we're going in this direction where it's loosely based on another model called the Family Resource Center model that we at our agency are leaning into. But the idea is to bring resources together for service, in person in one location to remove barriers. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts about that community school strategy?
Absolutely. I've loved your thoughts on that and your insights into, again, taking a Department of Health and Human Services and getting it closer to the individuals that you're working with and that you're trying to impact. And again, we talk about a community school model. That's something that I know that you and I have had multiple conversations on. The thought process here is, again, you have a student with all of these difficulties that I lined up earlier, and instead of sending them here or sending them there, allowing that student to have access to all of those services and the personnel right there on the school site. And that was something I will tell you back from when I was full-time in the classroom. We had a great collaborative relationship with the Boys and Girls Club. And it was tremendous to bring them on site and to share services where the students then literally knew they could go to the Boys and Girls Club for help in my class and for, kind of the broader development. They did a lot of social skills there and things like that. And vice versa. They would come to me and talk to me about things they were learning there and the folks they were dealing with there. And there was a counseling component there and other things. But again, us having that collaborative relationship allowed those students to, hey, these folks work together. These are adults that care about me. These are services offered to me. And it really helps streamline that rather than say, hey, we'll just go over here. And again, how intimidating that would be as a young person or as a parent that goes, okay, so now I'm supposed to go to this building and interact with who and do what. That can be intimidating, and so I think that the more that we're allowing those resources and that personnel available directly to people who need it, the better. It's going to be more access.
Absolutely. And what connected with me in the community schools model, especially over the last roughly year and a half when we've been dealing with the pandemic, is the mental health needs of our kids, not just in schools, but our kids and families, our citizens, our neighbors, are so much greater than they were prior to COVID-19. And one of the resources that the community school strategy brings into the school is a deeper mental health opportunity. It just really connected with me as we were talking about community schools as the way to rally resources. It also connected with me that the community school strategy is a local strategy, meaning that the school district or the school itself has the luxury and the flexibility to bring in whatever partners are best for their kids and their community. It's not, the state saying this is what has to be in your space. It's building the infrastructure for schools to bring in whoever they see fit.
And I think once you go down that road, and by the way, I think when we talk about long-term, how do we get an education system to really, I'll be honest with you. I look at other states and I still get frustrated. The top state in the country in reading proficiency is Massachusetts. And they have just under 50% reading on, as advanced in reading. Yeah, and you go, okay, so they're the best, but they're hitting a benchmark of about half of their students are really reading where we would like to see a targeted reading skill level. And you look at that and go, look, what are we doing? What are we doing to help? And guess what? And they do a great job, by the way. They do a lot of things well. But if you're in poverty in Massachusetts, that
disparity is just as great as it is
exactly.
Here.
So they haven't solved that issue either. So even the best actors struggle with overcoming those barriers. So what can we do? And I think, again, the long-term play here, the long-term, how do we just improve this system to really work for all kids with all backgrounds, is to your point, encourage that local investment, that local work, that local community to surround students and help them succeed. And when you look at that, to your point, that's where I worked at a nonprofit for the state chamber, and that's one of the things we always try to encourage is, hey, your local business, they want to help. Let's find ways to get them in. Let's find ways to help to let them help students, help the school in these different type of programs and activity. But the more that we can do that, and the less siloed we are, that's how we're going to start overcoming a lot of these issues that, again, even our highest performing states still struggle with the disparity for students in poverty. And so I think that's got to be an approach when we talk about moving forward is, again, and by the way, our communities look very different. I mean, you go around the state, and I love getting to go to all the different corners of the state. It's very different. Again, getting to teach in a school in downtown Oklahoma City and getting to teach in a school in southeast Oklahoma, different issues. Now, there's a lot of things that are similar, right? But then there's different issues that are going on there. There's different issues that go on in suburbia. There's different issues that go on far west Oklahoma. And I think it's very important to have that localized approach and to say, look, what are the community? Again, certain communities are they're very proud of the industry around them, and they really want to get engaged and have students really have an on-road to getting involved in that type of business. Let's help them do it. Let's break down barriers. Let's really encourage that local involvement, that local engagement. And to your point, that is part of the approach I really like that you've taken with that model. And it is to not do this top down. This is what it needs to look like. No. We're going to encourage. We're going to break down barriers, and we're going to let that really foster the way that you see fit there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Also, what's interesting is that you highlighted a lot that the challenges are local, and there are differences from downtown Oklahoma City to southeast Oklahoma, but the solutions are also local.
That's right.
Right. So, the resources available in southeast Oklahoma are completely different than the resources available in downtown Oklahoma City. So we have to recognize that as systems and make sure just to build the infrastructure to embrace both a local issue and a local solution.
And that's where, I had mentioned this to you, but, there's a school district that they were published in a book called Districts That Succeed. And again, we had a national writer, Karen Chenoweth from the Washington Times, did this. She did a piece on them a few Sundays ago as well, but wrote this book about, hey, let's find some schools that are really high achieving in areas of high poverty, and let's see what they're doing. And let's have that conversation, see how are they solving this. And 2 of the districts are from Oklahoma. One of them, and really the one that they highlighted the most, was Cottonwood Public Schools down in southeast Oklahoma. And there's another school district called Lane Public Schools right there in the area. And it's an incredible story. There's a superintendent down there named John Daniels. We got to chat with him the other day.
We did. It was great.
And, their approach was, so we have students in high poverty. We have very limited resources here. Over 90% of our kids come from outside of our district. What is it we can do? And again, superintendent there, they did a lot of research and looking at reading. And they said, look, we need to ensure all of our reading instruction is spot on. It really is in line with the science of reading. Now, this has got a lot of attention. That's not exactly like a super hot, topic. Like that's not a real, sexy topic to talk about, right? Like the science of reading. But, it's really gained a lot of traction in the last 2 years because the reality is if students don't understand the phonetic sounds that syllables make and piece them together in a way to help them read, you're not going to be able to teach the later basics of reading. And what we found was, in a lot of places, this was absent. And so the science of reading has become this really, now, like I said, in the education circles, it's become really a prominent topic because you have to ensure that students understand that. And just think about your own kids when you think about teaching them reading. They break down the sounds, and that's how they can piece words together later. And there were some other concepts that floated around that were just different ways of teaching it. But that's very important. It's very important to do this early and to understand competencies before you move on. If you move them on before they have those competencies, they're always going to struggle with a lot of their understanding of the reading materials. And so you really partner, and again, I'm not meaning to nerd out here on the science of reading, but you partner that phonetic understanding with content knowledge. And you think about that too. If you have no idea what the words mean that you're reading, you're not going to be able to read when you get into, there's an old concept that's been around the education circles for a while, is up until 3rd grade, you learn to read, and after 3rd grade, you read to learn. That's where you flip the script, and now you got to learn about the science principles, right? You got to learn about biology. Well, you got to be able to read those principles in order to understand it. And so Cottonwood took this, and getting back to the story. So Cottonwood took this approach that, hey, we are going to absolutely go all in. We're going to expand our time teaching reading with kids. And here's what we're going to do. We're not going to be as worried about grade level. All the 3rd graders here, all the 2nd graders, we're not going to worry about that. What we're going to worry about is because we've seen that it's incredibly important that these competencies are met at a lower age level, that we're not moving kids on till they have that content knowledge. And then when they do, we're going to move them with other kids that are at that competency level. And we're just going to align kids by where they are in a competency scale. We're not going to worry as much about, well, these 7 and she's 9. No, we're not going to worry about that. We're going to ensure we're going to make time in the schedule for it. We're going to completely, and again, getting into the details here, we're going to completely reorganize our schedule, which is a pain in the rear, right? I mean, so we're going to change our schedule for all of our teachers, for all, we're going to change everything to ensure there's extra time for reading and to ensure that we're moving kids based on their competency level inside these groups. And what they've seen is dramatic success in their reading scores. And again, with a student population that is high on the poverty scale, and it's got the attention of some of these national writers to go, what are you guys doing down there? And John Daniels told them the story, that it was this unapologetic approach to reading, that for a while they actually put the basketball team outside and so that they could utilize the gym to do this extra reading practices, and they were doing these kind of innovative computer science courses as well. But hey, they needed the room, and they put basketball outside for a while. And hey, I'm a basketball coach, but I got to love the approach of no, we have got to help these students learn to read earlier. There was a sense of urgency they had. And again, the second part of the story that's so incredible to me is the Lane superintendent comes over to him and says, hey, what are you guys doing? I want to know what you guys are doing. I do a great job. Again, I'll kind of plug her book, Districts That Succeed. She talks about, what a humble approach. Hey, your scores are better than ours. Tell me what you're doing. And guess what? Lane has started adopting a lot of those policies. their test scores are going through the roof now. And again, you just look at the ability to think outside the box, to do this approach of what can we do to really improve our students' reading. Early on, there was a real thorough investigation of how to do that, and then a very intentional plan. And then to see the humility of these leaders that go, look, no, we want to do what's best for kids. We want to improve our student performance as well. What are you doing? We want to do that. I love that story.
I do too, and I also loved the opportunity to talk to the superintendent out there. He was passionate about the work that he's doing, and that, again, that level of humility that you bring up to share. It's not competitive, it's collaborative for the purpose of serving kids. It was just super impactful. So thank you for sharing that incredible story of what's happening in our communities.
Well, when you say, and again, I love this podcast so much because we're highlighting these positive stories. That's an incredible story. That's an incredible story that, again, you've got this national writer that now has done multiple op-eds on them, that has included them in a book, that just says, wow, look at what's going on here in Southeast Oklahoma. And I want to tell those stories. I know you do too. And you just look at what can happen when a leader takes that type of approach of, look, we're going to do what it takes. We're going to a lot of hard work. Hey, it's never fun to change a system and say, look, I know we traditionally have done it this way, but we're going to change it. And he talked about, look, my staff, once I showed them the successes and once I showed them a path forward, they were all on board for it. And again, I think that approach was indicative of what we talked about earlier. Okay, what's best for kids? Hey, it was sometimes brutal, but at the end of every year, I'd give my students a survey. Hey, tell me how I did. Straight up, tell me. Shoot me straight. Not going to hurt my feelings. I want to be better. Why? I know that might not make a huge difference for you at this point if you point out something for me to improve, but it will for the kids coming through next year. And I always ask them, hey, so for you, for your fellow classmates, for the betterment of everybody, tell me what I can do to be better. Tell me what was helpful, but then tell me, okay, where did I struggle? Where did I lose you? Where could I have improved as a teacher to have been more beneficial for you? And I think that we just always have to take that approach individually, but also as an organization, as a state, as systems. What can we do to be better? Because again, that end goal of what's best for kids, again, we all know those life-changing stories of those teachers that absolutely, or those workers at DHS, or the individuals in the community that touch someone's life and it's forever different. There's a moment of before and after. And those stories are just and again, I love this podcast. You're talking about those, but those are the stories that hit you. But those are what we're capable of doing if we take that type of approach. And if we take that type of approach as a system, as an organization, as a state, I think the possibilities are endless.
Absolutely. The upside for the state of Oklahoma is huge. And we are here all so passionate about becoming top 10 and moving forward, again, for the benefit of the people that we all jointly serve. But I'm not sure that we're going to rest at top 10. So I would love any thoughts you may have on the big picture of education globally. You and I have talked about some books and some resources on this point. Who across the world is doing education right or more right than we might be doing, and what can we pull from those places?
Oh, wow. That's a fantastic question. And you're giving me an opportunity here to nerd out for a minute. But, so a few things here. I think that when we look as a state, I agree with you. I'm unapologetic that I want us to be the best state in the country. I would love for us to lead the world for our kids because our kids deserve it, right? Our kids deserve it. And I think it's got to be an approach to take a look at everything we're doing and how can we improve it. And again, when I meet teachers, I meet people that want to change the world. I meet people that want to do all they can for kids. Are we helping them in that approach? Are we helping them? Are there barriers in their way? Are there things we can do to better provide resources and best practices and scale that and help them along the way? And I'll talk about that here in a minute. But I think we always have to have that approach. So I love that. And when we look at other countries, one of my favorite books and just kind of a high level on this approach is we had the Amanda Ripley did her book, The Smartest Kids in the World. And they take an approach. Again, they feature some Oklahoma schools and parents as well on that book. But they take an approach of looking at what different states do. One of the things is I'm a big fan of the concept of being able to find ways for teachers to make a lot more money and stay in the classroom. That's kind of one of my frustrations. Is that again I love our school leaders, love our superintendents and the work that they do. But I also hate that we encourage all of our teachers, hey, we'll pay you a lot more if you get further away from kids every day. And I want our best teachers to stay in the classroom. And it was interesting in the book, they talk a lot about a South Korean model where they're all unapologetically teacher recruitment. We want you to make, there's a teacher feature in the book that makes $1 million because they just basically have this incentivized system to pay a teacher more and more and more, no matter how, to take on more and more kids to sign up for their class. And again, there's some problems with the implementation of that. As you can probably, first thing in your mind is, well, we don't want a teacher teaching 1,000 kids. Absolutely. I think it's an interesting approach that they're just like, well, how do we do this? How do we encourage more people to get in the classroom? Can we look at it differently? I thought that was a really interesting concept. You also look at countries in Western Europe that take the approach of a teacher internship for a year, that do the kind of, hey, you're not going to be a full-time teacher first. You're actually going to watch and be an apprentice for a year because, as most teachers will tell you, that first year, they throw 120 students at you in the secondary level, and you might be teaching 6 preps, 4 preps, It's incredibly tough. That's why our average, our teacher burnout rate is, under 3 years is the average time of a teacher in a classroom here. And so how do we properly prepare a teacher and onboard them in a way that's not, hey, all the responsibilities of the job from day one? Are there ways that we can provide more internships, get them in the classroom more as they're going through their, college experience or things like that? I love that. I love that approach. So I think there's some interesting innovation going on around the world. I will say this also. What we do, and I think is the 100% right approach, but is different than other places in the world, is all of our kids go to school. We want all of our students to have access. Again, we have choices, right? Our kids might go to a public school. They might go to a public charter school. They might go to a private school. They might be homeschooled. But there is kind of this system in place that allows for students to go whatever pathway they want. Some other countries don't have as big of an open door, and so they kind of target the segment of their population that they teach and that they utilize their resources on. Which again, I think for us, is just what an American concept, though, right? Hey, no, we're taking everyone who wants to come in this school, we're taking them. And we are going to absolutely do our best to make sure that they're ready for the workforce and they're ready to fulfill their dreams. And so that is sometimes when you look at nation by nation, it is a difference there. But I've been encouraged by a lot of what we've seen in the United States from a concept of rethinking and reimagining kind of the roles for individual teachers and that role I talked about earlier, but also personalization for students. Also, you and I talk about the science of hope. I'm going to share another Oklahoma story here when it comes to that. I've been impressed with, my hometown. There's a lot of schools that have an alternative ed route for students if they get into high school. And again, this can be a variety of reasons why a kid might attend an alternative school, right? It could be issues with drugs or issues at school directly, or it might be, hey, they've got to help out around the house. There can be issues there where it honestly helps them to go to a night school or a more flexible school model. And so one of the things they did was they moved from an approach that was alternative ed or moving kids out of general population as a punishment, encouraging and incentivizing them to get back to the other school. And instead of, hey, you got in trouble, so you're going to be out of school for X amount of time, and that's the way it is. No, you got in trouble. Let's work to get you back. So as soon as you do these things and show us these things, we want to get you back over there. This is up for you to get caught up. This is up for you to show that you've kind of learned from that or that you're taking things to address that. But it becomes, and again, they've got he's an old football coach over there. His name is James Singleton, and he's the counselor. He's their champion. Hey, you're here with me. I want to work with you. I want to help you. And then, hey, and now we got this bond. And I've talked to those kids that go, hey, I talk to the Coach Singleton all the time. Because, again, they turned it from this punishment to this opportunity. No, you're going to come here and you're going to get this extra help. You're going to come over here and you're going to get this guy that's your champion, that's enthusiastic, that's all about helping you be successful. And you start looking at how can we improve in education. First of all, we've always got to challenge our top learners. Again, you talked about me teaching an AP class. We've always got to say, hey, we're going to push you kids. Because those are the kids that if you don't push them, right, they'll coast. Got to push those top 1% of academic learners. But we have to be really specific about the ways that we help those that have fallen behind. those that have these other issues, those that need the extra help when it comes to, I also taught a class that was, it was called AVID, Advancement via Individual Determination. And intentionally, we targeted students that had those type of issues. Parents, didn't go to school or weren't involved in the workforce, or there was a litany of criteria there. But what we tried to do was fill in those gaps, right? Really help them build skills that would help them not only finish school but enter the workforce, help them fill out applications, help them learn just, one of my favorite activities with them was I would have the students come in and we'd do a mock interview in front of the whole class. Hey, Justin Brown, tomorrow you're interviewing, here's the job, I'm interviewing you. And they walk in, and it starts from when they walk in the door, right? And it's right in front of the whole class. And when
How terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
and sometimes I'd have the principal come in, and you're going to get a round table because, hey, sometimes you interview, right? And it's not just one person. It's a team of folks. So I'd bring this, some of the principals and administrators and say, hey, today let's really crank this up a notch and have them sit around the room. And we'd interview them and ask them questions, and then we'd debrief in front of the whole class. And I was amazed how many times the kids came back and were like, that was scary. It was terrifying, right? But that was really helpful for me, right? I was like, yeah, don't get out your phone. Yeah, make eye contact. Be open. If you don't know something, tell me you don't know them. Tell them you'll do your due diligence and research. Again, but you just think about how many students, hey, if they're coming from a difficult background, if they're in foster care. Again, I had several students that have done really well that came out of foster care, and it was really tough for them to have kind of that steady presence at home. But to walk them through those type of skills that can help them be successful, I've loved that approach of, hey, we're going to turn our alternative ed center into, hey, we're going to target these students, we're going to help them, we're going to build this support system around them.
Well, that seems like such a great way to really engage with those kids and help to solve potentially for some of those more overwhelming barriers. We have to look, in my opinion, I'm not an education guy, but my opinion is that so many times those sort of disciplinary issues that occur are not because the kid is bad, but it's because there's something else going on. And so when we move, potentially move them to that sort of alternative setting, it may be an opportunity for us to be more customized with our solutions and bring in other resources.
And that's such a great point. And you and I have talked about this before, but we're all unique. We're all different. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different approaches. We all see the world, in a different lens. And so when you encounter an individual that's upset, that's frustrated, it's so important, to your point, that we take the time to figure out what is needed, what would help you. And again, this requires time. It requires personnel. It requires resources to be able to take that person and go, okay, first of all, and by the way, you got to build that relationship with them or they don't want to tell you. That's the other thing we've talked about is if you don't have some kind of relationship, if you're just that's part of, when you look about good teachers around the state and some of our fantastic teachers, you talk to their students would run through a brick wall for them, right? And at that point, when you have that kind of connection with an individual, same way with DHS, when you have that kind of connection where they know where your heart is, they know that you're trying to do what's best for them, hey, sometimes tough love is an approach, as a teacher and as a coach. There were a lot of times I had tough conversations with kids. And I hoped over time they would know it's because I loved them, because I cared about them. But that sometimes that happens, right? We'd have to do that with our family members. We have to do that with individuals. But that takes a relationship. If you don't have a relationship and it's just tough love, that person's not going to listen to you. They're not going to go pursue the things that you're offering for them. And so I think that it's really important to listen, to have people in place that can build those relationships and really try to seek to understand, what can we do to help you? What is your unique circumstance? Now let me go out and find the resources that could help you. And again, that takes time, takes personnel, takes resources. So it's not just an easy fix there for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so as we wrap up, I have one more question for you. During the time that you're in this space, the policy space, you're still a teacher, but in this time in your life, what do you hope to change? What's the target for education? What does success look like for Secretary Walters in the education space in the state of Oklahoma?
Wow, that's a great question. So, I will say, and I know I come back to this a lot, but, my approach in this position as Secretary of Education has been very similar to my approach as a teacher. As a teacher, I looked in a classroom of, they varied in size, right? But I looked at, 28 kids, and I tried to do all that I could to give every one of them an opportunity at success. And I told them, look, and whether that means you're going to OU, whether that means you're going to a career tech, whether that means you're going directly into workforce, that's your call. But what I want to do is I want you to leave in my room. I want you to leave our school with the ability that you choose, right? All the doors are open to you, but also that you're encouraged to do that. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I promise I'll get around. I'll get to that point there. But to me, one of the most heartbreaking things in the world is when you look at teenage suicide, when you look at suicide of young people. I mean, for me, unbelievably heartbreaking to think of a young person getting to that point. They're so early in life to get to that level of desperation. And so, I always tell kids, I love them. And if they ever need anything, phone's always there, always the door open, whatever you need, but also try to encourage them that life will get dark. I mean, no matter where we are, we've experienced death, sickness. It's going to happen. I wish it wouldn't, but it will. But always seek out the light during those times. Always know things can get better, right? In those moments of despair, reach out to somebody, someone who's shown they care about you. Reach out to that person who maybe you don't have years of relationship, but that person's genuine. You know that person cares about you. Reach out to them. Don't make a decision in despair. And to me, the approach of every student as an individual, the approach of, I want you to be successful academically, I want you to be successful career, but I want you to be successful as a human person. I want you to be fulfilled. I want you to be happy. And again, that looks different to every student. But I think that's the approach I've taken in the role of Secretary of Education from a statewide perspective. These are 700,000 individual students that I hope experience all of those things, that have that pathway open to them. And to me, what does success look like? I want Oklahoma to lead the country in education, not because that's, that's great, but because of what that would mean, not as a statistic, but for every one of those kids, that means they have such a better opportunity at a job, at having a family, at having kids, at being fulfilled in life, which means, you look at the positive side, and it also means less likelihood that they're going to end up in prison. They're going to end up, doing drugs, and that they're going to end up, sadly, you look at even life expectancy with all of those things. But to me, I have been, very blessed, very honored to be able to be in this position, to be able to work with folks like yourself, and try to bring that message and that thought process of, look, if we can all work together, we can absolutely do this, and our young people deserve to have that kind of opportunity at success.
Beautiful. Well, I just wanted to end by saying thank you for not only being here, but for your energy that you're bringing to the education space, for your partnership in all of these places in which our systems really do need to work together and collaborate. And then I wish you nothing but the best for you professionally as a teacher, because it means so much for those kids, but also for your growing family. You have a beautiful family that seems to grow every month or so, but you're just doing such great things, and I'm super thankful again for your partnership and for you being here today.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I've got my wife and my 4 little ones. We had a 4th, just not too long ago. So we're pretty busy at the house too. But I've got, I'm married up. My wife is unbelievable, and we've got the little ones going, and it's a lot of fun, and with having that many around the house, and so appreciate you, and thank you for having me on. I love this conversation, so thank you so much for your time.
Very good. Have a great day, my friend.
Thank you, sir. You too.